It is time for our college football best bets presented by FanDuel. Chip Patterson's been great all season. Oh, man, he had a bad week. Usually when Chip has a bad week, he bounces back big. He's still 10 games over 500 this season, 107 and 97. That was Danny's voice you just heard. Danny Kanell is not even battling with Chip Patterson anymore. He's just battling to get his head above water. It's Danny's swim to 500. He almost got there in week 3, but a bad week 4 and 5, and he's down below 400 week 6.
Coming up. Coming up.
Chip's there up on the boat. Danny's heading down to where FSU is, down at the bottom, the sunken treasure. And he had a winning week last week, did Danny Kanell. He's close to 460, so maybe we can get him there this week. He was 20 and 18 last week. Congratulations on one of your very first winning weeks of the season, Danny. More of that to come. It's one of the first.
I've had multiple.
Producer Boney, he had 2. Chip, we have 2 byes this week, so we have a ton of games. It's only Oregon, #1 team in the country, and #22 Tulane, the only teams idle this week. We're going to start on Friday night. It's #24 UNLV, a 7.5-point favorite at San Jose State. Chip.
Second straight home game for the Spartans, and look, that Boise State game was so much closer than the final score indicated. You've got a pick 6 in there. You've got the inability to punch it in late. For those of you who had San Jose State plus 14.5, my condolences. I happened to lose it on an undercall, but I think this is where San Jose State at home for the second straight week. You got a contender coming in. This time it's UNLV. I think they're going to be able to hang inside this number. Give me San Jose State plus the 7.5.
Oh, Chip, see, this is where I want to make up some ground here, Hassel, because I'm on the other side of this one. Give me UNLV. We've talked a lot about this Mountain West race where you need some help if you're in UNLV, but the one thing you control is what your opponent is in front of you. I think they come in motivated. I think they bring that ground game. As much as we've talked about Boise State and Ashton Genty, they've got the best rushing offense in the Mountain West. Guess who has the #2? UNLV does. I think they're able to establish that ground game. Haj Malik Williams, remember he took over early this season as quarterback. He's also leading the team in rushing as well. You've got Jaden Thomas as well coming down right at downhill. I think they get the most of San Jose State. I think their defense also, Barry Odom, defensive-minded coach, will shut down San Jose State. So I will lay them with UNLV and take the under as well.
Looking to extend that school record to an 8th straight win away from home, but as you mentioned, that race in the Mountain West, in order to get to the championship game, they need Colorado State to lose, and they don't play Colorado State this season. Let's go to Saturday. We're going to go in chronological order here. It's big noon. It's Indiana at Ohio State. It's a 2-touchdown spread here, Danny. A lot of Indiana fans are wondering, how close do we need to make this to make sure that we get in the playoff at 11-1?
I think they have to keep it around the point spread. You know, that magical number for me is probably between 15 to 17 points, which even if they don't cover, I think it has to be in there. And the reason why is you've seen a couple other teams that are in this top 10 that have losses. Texas primarily being the biggest one, where they lost by 15 points at home against Georgia. They didn't look that great in that game, but if you're Indiana, at least you could hold up and say, hey, we went on the road, lost by around the same number, and our resume is about the same as yours, because Texas's resume isn't great, and you can at least stack up next to them, another team in that top 10, and say, here's the number. All right, on to the game itself. As much as I would love to back Indiana on the whole game, I'm just a little bit nervous about how this thing could go for them, but I think they come out early, give it their best shot. I think Mike Shanahan, their offensive coordinator, has some plays dialed up. They have one of the more underrated wide receiving cores in the entire country. I think they keep it inside the number for the first half. So I'll take Indiana plus 7.5. I do worry about depth in that run game for Ohio State, maybe getting a late score to cover the number in the game, which is why I also like the over the total. I think these teams will both put up some points. So I'll take Indiana first half getting 7.5 and over the total for the game.
I love the way you're putting together a treasure map. My heart is just filled with pride right now, DK. I'm going to isolate a fantastic opportunity, because this is when you want the best bets, right? I do think Indiana is going to be able to hang inside that number. I think Indiana is going to be competitive. I think the loss of Seth McLaughlin, the starting center, is going to allow that Indiana defensive line, which has played better than their heights, better than their weights, and better than their recruiting projections all season long. But I think we've got a team that is going to outplay the opponent in the fourth quarter, because Indiana is one of the best fourth quarter teams in the country. It doesn't matter whether they were big favorites or dogs. It doesn't matter whether they are a team that was up by a lot or trying to pull away from a close game. Indiana on offense, on defense, the best scoring margin in the country when it comes to the fourth quarter. And now I get them +2.5. I love it. There's lots of ways to win. It could be Indiana trying to overcome a deficit that Ohio State is defending. It could be Indiana just playing Ohio State even in the final 15 minutes. But it's been a well, and it still has water. Indiana, fourth quarter, +2.5.
All right, let's move on to the SEC, and one of those teams with a couple of losses that is kind of fighting with the other teams for that at-large spot, and it's the Ole Miss Rebels, 10.5-point favorites at Florida. Florida beat LSU last week, and Florida would make it a lot easier on the committee if they were to do it again this week.
They would. Unfortunately, I don't think they do. I think the best thing that happened for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss is the fact that Lane Kiffin can show them what happened last week so that Ole Miss doesn't have any chance of overlooking the Florida Gators. And as much as I liked that team last week against LSU, I think LSU is the most overvalued win within the SEC. I mean, look, Bama goes and trounces LSU, and they get so much of a bounce from that. Oh, it's hard to win at Baton Rouge at night. It's almost like we forgot that LSU lost to USC to start the season, a very average team from the Big Ten. I think Ole Miss is one of the better teams in the SEC. In fact, if you ask me which one I think could win it all, I think they're one of probably 2 or 3 that could actually do it. And they could use this bye week to get back, to get healthy, to get some of their players. And that defense, especially that front line with Princely Yu and Walter Nolan, I think they'll be able to confuse and harass DJ Lagway enough. I'm still not sold that he's 100% healthy from that hamstring. So give me Ole Miss to cover and give that defense to slow down Florida. So I'll take the under as well.
Guys, I'm worried about Ole Miss's hands, you know? Like, this is going to be a really important game for them to have good hands. And the reason why is because we can get a lot of this, you know? A lot of this. Just high fives. Just 2 weeks of high fives. Last time we saw Ole Miss, they beat Georgia. Everyone's rushing the field. High fives everywhere. Off last week. Walking around campus. No games. Just high fives left and right. And now you're going to go into the swamp. And I agree with you on the LSU win. I'm not overreacting to that, but I can take the temperature of vibes, and the vibes are so much better on the sideline, on the field, and in that stadium. If Ole Miss lets this thing get too close late, I mean, we might have a straight up upset. But I do think vibes-wise, +10.5 is worth a bite.
Yeah, it could be the Florida hands instead of the high fives for Ole Miss. Wouldn't that be something? Let's go to number 8 Miami. At home against Wake Forest, the Canes have had to sit on that loss to Georgia Tech for 2 weeks, but they still control their ACC fate, Danny.
That's one of the things you mentioned there, having to sit on that. That's what every team wants to do after a rough loss, a surprising upset to Georgia Tech. You just want to get back on the field and get that taste out of your mouth. That's what I think actually helps Miami a ton. Not the best environment there, noon, but I think they come out angry. I think they come out on fire. Cam Ward's leadership, again, it wasn't his fault. Most importantly, I think this is exactly what the defense for Miami needs to face a Wake Forest team that's been up and down. They run that slow mesh, but I think the defensive line for Miami gets back on track. So I like Miami to win this one, to cover, and to hold Wake Forest offense in check. So I like the under as well. I think it's a convincing victory for the Canes.
Yeah, I'm right with you on the under. It's one of my favorite plays of the week. This is a really, really big number when you consider the sleepy noon start, when you consider how ineffective this Wake Forest offense has been at times. Dave Clawson's Demon Deacons program has been able to close the talent gap when they've had really dynamic quarterback play and good wide receivers. That offense has really let them down in some big moments this year. So I just don't even think that it behooves Wake Forest to try to play a high possession game, because the pass defense has been so leaky. A lot of this point to a game that Miami dominates, yes, but also is a little bit lower scoring. So I'm on the under 64.5.
If Miami were to somehow slip up, then that would open the door for Clemson. But Clemson is on the outside looking in right now. Miami controlling their own fate. So does SMU. And SMU only needs one win in their last 2 games to get to that ACC championship game. It begins as a 9.5-point favorite in Virginia.
So this game, it's funny because Chip and I do not discuss our picks, and I think we're on the exact same page here. I like SMU to win, but Virginia's had a couple backdoor covers, one against Clemson, one against Notre Dame, where they're sort of this team that they're having a better year than some people thought, have actually been encouraged from what Tony Elliott's Cavaliers have shown. But I don't trust SMU after watching Boston College give them a little bit of a handful offensively, and SMU, couldn't quite just close out the game because they just want to advance. It's survive and advance. They don't need style points. They just want to get to the ACC championship game. For that reason, I trust SMU's offense. I'm going to go SMU's team total over 34.5 points. It's been a winner. Chip has used this one a couple times. I trust their offense to put up big points. I don't know about the backdoor cover. That makes me a little bit nervous. So I'm just going to take SMU team total over.
Let the children sing. Right there with you, Danny. Very clearly, as you mentioned, it's a place that I've been going a lot. That defense for SMU has a good season-long statistical profile, but it has slipped up a little bit in recent weeks. You mentioned the Boston College game. So I need to go the multiple ways to win angle for my best bet. And when I'm looking at this, I think that SMU's offense is the part I can trust. I wouldn't hate if you were trying to talk me into a full game over just because of the way that SMU defense has been trending, but you're just so hot and cold when you're talking about Virginia's offense, the mistakes that they can make, which negate good drives. So let's just focus on the SMU part of this. I do think that the Mustangs will be able to get to the key number of 35. Love that team total over.
Those are the early games on Saturday. When we come back, we will head to the afternoon. That is where CBS has its Big Ten game of the week. On paper, you think, oh, Minnesota not going to give Penn State much of a game. Well, history tells us we could see a big upset in the Big Ten. Continuing to pick our ranked college football matchups against the spread. It's that time of year. SEC gonna SEC with quote-unquote bye weeks like UMass and UTEP coming in for slaughter. Have a really good one in the Big 12 between BYU and Arizona State with playoff implications. We'll pick that in just a little bit. With Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson, we'll start in the Big 10, though. Illinois is at Rutgers. This is crazy. Rutgers has lost 40 straight games against ranked opponents. 15 years, Danny, it's been since they've beaten a ranked team.
That makes me feel better about my pick because Illinois just came in the back end. This comes down to, who do you trust more? And I give the slight edge to Brett Bielema's squad here to go on the road. The one thing I trust and my favorite play in the game is the under because I think the Big Ten is going to Big Ten here in November. It's about that point in the season. Both of these defenses, I think, will be on full display. Quarterback's play has been okay, more run-based offenses, but I do like Illinois to win on the road in a lower-scoring game.
I think that we saw from Luke Altmaier much more of that early season Luke Altmaier in the win against Michigan State, a very dominant win for Illinois. He had kind of lost his way going into the off week, but I think this is a spot where I trust Luke Altmaier and I trust those Illinois wide receivers to be able to go and get the plays that you need to win in Piscataway. I am also on the Fighting Illini.
Say what you want about the Big Ten and in the middle of the Big Ten, that second tier like the Illinois, the Iowas, all that stuff. At least they play 9 conference games.
Yes.
SEC won't do that. Instead, they want to have these bye games late in the season, like Georgia at home against UMass as a 6-touchdown favorite.
Yeah, I think this is one where Georgia continues to kind of get that offense back on track. Carson Beck seems to be out of his funk. Now I think you try to get his touchdown to interception ratio, which is around 19-12. You try to make that a little bit better. You try to separate. I think they get it in a pretty big first half from him. But I'm just going to go ahead and lay them with Georgia and also take the under because one thing that's been constant is Georgia's defense. I think UMass will struggle to score more than a field goal. So I'll lay them with Georgia and take the under.
So this UMass team, scored 10 points in the first half against Mississippi State. This UMass team scored 20 in the first half against Liberty. Don Brown might be fired, but those players are playing for pride. Why? Because you're at UMass. You're not playing for the transfer portal. I'm sorry. You were playing to not embarrass yourself in Sanford Stadium. UMass, first half, plus 24.5. Georgia might be a little slow starting. You're feeling pretty good about yourself after that big win against Tennessee. Can the Minutemen hang over the course of 4 quarters? No. But can they hang within 24.5 over 2? I say yes.
And speaking of that Tennessee team that they just beat, Tennessee is at home against UTEP as a 6 touchdown favorite. 41.5 is the line we're going with here. And the Vols right now in need of style points. They're the first team out of the CFP.
That's why I've got Tennessee winning big. They want to get that taste out of their mouth. The performance last week, that offense, which has been better. They want to get Nico some numbers as well. A very similar play. I'll lay them with Tennessee, and I'll take the under on this one, too, because Tennessee's defense still underrated. I know they gave up a bunch of points to Georgia, but I think they get that corrected against UTEP.
Yeah, Tennessee wants that taste out of their mouth immediately, and the way that you get that antiseptic mouthwash in and out is by getting up by double digits in the first quarter. Vols, first quarter, -9.5. We just need 2 scoring drives in the first 15 minutes. I think we get it.
All right, let's check in with another team that's currently in the playoff right now. It's a Penn State team. The schedule doesn't look like they're going to trip up, and it looks like they're going to get a home playoff game. But listen to this. Penn State's lost back-to-back trips to Minnesota. And the last 2 times Minnesota, Chip, has beaten a top 5 team, it's been Penn State. This is our CBS game. What's your play?
Oh, I think this is going to be close. I think this is going to be low scoring. I think PJ Fleck, he wants to row the boat slowly. By limiting possessions in this game, what Minnesota's going to be able to do is keep that margin close, get that home crowd alive, and try to get things just a little bit tight and a little bit nervy for a Penn State football program that has already sent out heads up to the season ticket holders about playoff games. I understand you got to do it for business, but for vibes, I like Minnesota to maybe threaten to play giant killer. I got Minnesota plus a 12.5, and I'm also tagging on the under 45.5.
Yeah, this feels kind of like last week's Oregon-Wisconsin game. Around the same point spread. Oregon was a little bit of a bigger favorite, but we saw that one come down to the wire and a field goal late in the game to Oregon, won by 3. I think this one could be similar. It's interesting because Penn State is probably in one of the best positions of anybody in that top 12 in the playoff hunt. So all they need to do is win. They don't need style points, and sometimes when you're in that situation, get a little bit more conservative. You don't call much of an aggressive game because you just don't want to screw it up. Meanwhile, you're Minnesota, you're playing at home, you're like, hey, let's shock the world and go out there and see what we can do. So I'm with you. I think Minnesota, they do their best to try to shut down Tyler Warren, the big, tight end who's been Penn State's biggest offensive weapon. I think they're able to contain him somewhat. So I'm with you. I also think the Penn State's defense will be, big challenge for Max Brosmer and this Minnesota offense. So I'll go ahead and take Minnesota to cover here and the under as well.
All right, let's move to the Big 12 and 2 teams kind of in opposite feelings right now. BYU coming off their first loss, Arizona State coming off a huge win. Both of these teams, really, if they win out, will likely be in a Big 12 championship game. But we've seen it, Danny, with Pittsburgh. We saw it with Iowa State. You lose your first game, you lose the next game as well.
Yeah, really, it just is so devastating. You have all this excitement, energy around the program, and then you get that first loss, and it's just like a gut punch to you. Look, I was talking to Pete Prisco earlier, our very own CBS Sports HQ, NFL, senior writer.
Senior
writer, and he was telling me how hyped up Arizona State is. And you know what? I kind of believe him. Yeah. Sold out first game this season. Kenny Dillingham has the squad playing with a ton of confidence. Sam Levitt, I think they might have the edge at quarterback. Cam Scatterbo, I think they have the edge at running back. Their defense is playing physical. I like Arizona State in this spot. I do think also you'll see BYU able to put up some points. I think this might be more of one of those old-fashioned kind of Big 12 wild games where you see a lot of points scored. So I like the over as well. But I think Arizona State keeps their hopes alive to make it to the Big 12 championship game and gets this big win.
Yeah, I'm just going to lock up the Sun Devils portion of that, right with you on the quarterback and the best player with Scatterbo and, of course, Sam Levitt. But I will also add, imagine what this could be for Arizona State if they had a competent kicking situation. Because you go back to that Cincinnati loss where they missed 15 short field goals. This could be a 9-1 team. They've been playing good ball all year. I'm riding with Arizona State. Their trajectory is going up. BYU is going down.
It is a huge weekend in the Big 12. We have a couple more big games to pick next, including Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes controlling their own fate to the college football playoff. But who do they have this week? Maybe the hottest team in the Big 12 at Arrowhead Stadium. All right, let's look at our next slate of games that we are going to pick against the spread. Huge one in the Big 12, Colorado at Kansas. That's at Arrowhead Stadium. Texas is at home against Kentucky. Texas in really good shape going into the last two games, but they have Texas A&M coming up next week. They also have Missouri at Mississippi State. Let's start, though, in the Big 12 with Coach Prime and those Colorado Buffaloes. Only 2.5-point favorites against Kansas. That's because Kansas has won back-to-back games against ranked teams for the first time in program history.
Do you realize much we've talked about strength of schedule? Lance Leipold and the Kansas Jayhawks have faced 6 teams in the current top 25. Their schedule has been incredibly tough, including this will be their 4th in a row against one of those opponents, and they have played the role of spoiler to almost perfection. I'm going to keep riding that wave. Jalen Daniels, who, his career has been up and down, derailed by injury. He's getting things going on the ground. Devin Neal, another pretty good running back. That, to me, is the most important aspect of this game. The fact that they have a running quarterback and a really good running back to be able to at least play some ball control. They're playing at Arrowhead Stadium. I think this place is going to be packed, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of Colorado fans, too. But I'm going to go ahead and ride the wave of the Kansas Jayhawks. Take those points and the under, whether slowing the game down with that game clock. I think they keep it to a lower scoring affair, so I'll go under and give me the Jayhawks.
Do you not fear Dennis Dodd? He told you an hour ago.
I'm not hating. I'm not hating.
He will spank. He will literally spank you.
He did.
If you doubt Colorado.
He did. He said the Colorado haters have been spanked.
All right, Chip, are you going to get spanked too?
Do you believe?
I do, Coach Prime. I absolutely do. I'll tell you what, this is one thing that stood out to me. So we would say that off the top of your mind, Colorado's a big public team, right? Like a team that everyone's rushing to bet, everyone's rushing to just throw their money behind them so they can root for the Buffs. And yet, even with that public support, Colorado is one of the best against the spread teams in the entire country. 7th in the nation in terms of their against the spread winning percentage, and also 7th in the nation in cover margin per game. Like, not just covering the spread, but by how many points are you doing it? We've got a 10-game sample set here. I just think this Colorado team continues to exceed the expectations that were set. They've already doubled their win total from last year. They've already exceeded their preseason win total in the eyes of the Vegas odds makers. And to me, the ability to stop the run, which has been really big for this Colorado success story, is huge, because you take Devin Neal away from Kansas, you make Jalen Daniels go figure it out, you might see some of those Jalen Daniels turnovers again and more opportunities for Shedeur Sanders. So I will take Colorado and lay the short number.
They win this, they'll be sitting pretty because they have Oklahoma State to close out. Oklahoma State still didn't have a win in Big 12 play this year. Let's go to Texas hosting Kentucky. Texas, Chip, can't yet clinch a spot in the title game in the SEC. They have A&M coming up next week.
Yeah, Texas's defense is the identity. Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, all the fancy little dirt bikes that they've got at all the skill positions. Like, that's the stuff that makes you your eyes attract to Texas. But there is a real grittiness to the way that this team plays, whether it's along the defensive line, whether it's Jade Barron there in the secondary. I just think that we've got a situation against Kentucky where I don't think Kentucky's going to be able to muster a lot of points. And whether it's starting early or whether it's later, eventually Quinn Ewers is going to get this thing rolling with the offense. So I like Texas under the key number of 21. Again, they could blow them out in the first half. They could cover it late, but it's just not a situation where I trust Kentucky to go into Austin and score all that many points against the Longhorns.
Yeah, I mean, Texas defense is great and Kentucky's offense is atrocious. That to me looks like a very comfortable win for Texas, 28-3, 34-7, something along those lines, because I do think last week was a little bit of a wake-up call for Texas, and I think Arkansas was a better team in a tougher environment on the road than coming back home where you want to take care of your business, get some of the starters out, and even with backups, I still think Kentucky would struggle to score. So I'll go ahead and lay them with the Longhorns and take the under, because again, I don't know how many points Kentucky puts on the board, if any.
All right, kudos to those teams. At least they're playing SEC teams this week. Clemson has always kind of felt like an SEC team. Maybe it's because they do things like this. Danny, they play Citadel here as a nearly 50-point favorite.
Yeah, Citadel has won 3 of 4. So they come in with a little confidence. I was trying to look for ways why. This is a big number. This, for me, is just too big of a number. They haven't played anybody, and they definitely haven't played Clemson. But look at this as a 30-point favorite. Thank you for pulling that up, Mike, because that's perfect for what I'm going with. I'm going to say that Clemson, with that South Carolina game coming up next week, They've been banged up. You just want to get in, take care of your business. Again, style points, does it really matter? Not really when your wins and losses aren't that great. They just want to make sure they keep their hopes alive to get to the ACC championship game, and they're looking at that game against South Carolina. So I say yes, they don't get the cover, but I'm also going to say the under hits here because I think it'll be a lower scoring game. Clemson's defense, I think, will slow down the Citadel more than enough to keep it under that number. So I'll take the Citadel to cover and under the total.
It's one of my locks of the week. Oh, I'm so fired up about this pick right here. The game, no. The lock, yes. It's going to be on the under. Clemson doesn't have any offensive linemen. I don't know if you watched all that Clemson Pitt game, but the offense is struggling because they are literally pulling anybody out of the stands to come put on pads and try to block for Cade Klubnik. Thank goodness he can break loose for a 50-yard touchdown to help them remain just a 2-loss team and in the ACC championship game. Clemson wants to play this game with one number in mind, 0, and that's additional injuries. We can't be pulling the pizza delivery guy out there to go compete against South Carolina next week, so they want to play this game like a service academy game, low possessions, and wouldn't you know it, the Citadel is a military college that has been known to just run the daggum football. This is going to look like Army-Navy, so that means we're going under, especially at 58.5.
Danny mentioned those 3 wins in the last 4 games. They've beaten VMI, Samford, and Wofford. See what they do against Clemson. You guys have referenced that game next week. It's Clemson against South Carolina. The Gamecocks are hosting Wofford.
If this was 49.5, like the Clemson number, I might take Wofford, but since it's a little bit lower, 42, a little bit more manageable, I'll go ahead and lay them with Clemson here. Lenore Sellers all of a sudden is really starting to develop as a passing quarterback. We've known about his athletic prowess and how much he can run. Again, you probably won't see him for 4 quarters of the game, but I do think South Carolina, who's been a great story, Shane Beamer, they get that big win, a miraculous win against Missouri, which avoided the major disaster. I think they're going to make this the thing that's pretty much done at halftime, but I'll go ahead and lay the points. I also think the over could hit here too. If they bring in some backups on that defense, rest them up, I think you could see some points here on the scoreboard. So I'll take South Carolina to cover and the over.
Yeah, give me the chickens. It wasn't the cleanest game against Missouri, but you get the win. Final home game. You want to play well. I'll take South Carolina and lay the points.
All right, short and sweet. Let's go to that Missouri team that lost that heartbreaker in Columbia, South Carolina. Just a 7.5-point line against Mississippi State.
I don't know about Chip. I'm kind of scared because I'm going to fade him, and you better watch out for Eli Drinkwitz because he will find you either on social media or on a radio show to call you out. But give me more cowbell because Mississippi State, they've been getting better throughout the season. Michael Van Buren, their quarterback, has really developed.
He's one of the Van Buren boys.
Yeah, exactly. One of the Van Buren boys. Yeah, I do think that Missouri, fraudulent's a strong word, but I think this is one of those games where they really have to make sure they ramp back up the energy after that devastating loss. And this is a game for Mississippi State where they look at it could totally change the complexion of their season. So I'll go ahead and take the home underdog here. Anything over that touchdown to get 7 and a hook, I'll take it. And I'll also take the under because I think it could be a slower starting game for both teams.
Yeah, last time we saw Mississippi State coming out of a bye week, they went to Athens, were very competitive against Georgia from the get-go, and for all 4th quarters, end up only losing that game by 10. Now we've got Missouri, and Missouri's coming to your house. I think they can hang within 7. Live dog situation here. Give me Mississippi State plus a 7.5.
Yeah, a lot of people wondering why Missouri is still ranked number 23, despite not having won a power conference game away from home this season. We're going to move to the night games when we come back to close things up as we pick every ranked game against the spread. Hey, Army could throw a major grenade into the CFP if they upset Notre Dame. Boise in play for a bye on CBS Sports Network, and Bama's on the road in Norman. All right, night game time. Saturday night, we've got a bunch of playoff contenders in action. There's a game between Army and Notre Dame. It's a top 20 game. This is a neutral site game, Yankee Stadium. Notre Dame a 14.5-point favorite. But if Army were to win that game, things could get real wild and woolly real fast. Let's pick them. Chris Hassel here with Danny Kanell. We also have Chip Patterson. Chip, there is a way here. If Army wins out, and they've got to win over Notre Dame, and they're unbeaten, there's a way that a power conference team could be kept out, a power conference champion, like let's just say Colorado, could be kept out of the playoff.
Yeah, that's the chaos scenario right here. It is not what I'm predicting with my best bet. No, I've got Notre Dame winning this game like they've done every single time they played Army dating back to 1958. Just 15 meetings in that time span, but still. For the Fighting Irish, they have been a team on a mission ever since the loss to Northern Illinois. I love the aggressiveness that they've had. They are running up the score. They are playing with an edge, and I think that's going to help them in a spot where being in Yankee Stadium, playing against Army, if they were a little bit loose or a little bit too tight, no, I think they're just right, dialed in, ready to finish the job. I'll take Notre Dame. I'll lay the points.
I'm with you, Chip. I love Army, the story. I think it's been awesome. I don't think it gets as sideways as the Navy game because Navy came out and turned it over 6 times. And clearly their quarterback had an issue with his hand that was bothering him. Bryson Daly's been banged up as well, though, for Army, the superstar quarterback who's been incredible. I wonder how his health is. But ultimately, I think this game could be close for a half. But ultimately, Notre Dame, more depth, more size, more ability to move the ball different types of ways. I think Notre Dame gets it done. I do like the under as well because I think Notre Dame's defense, well, they've already played Navy, so they played a similar style of offense, so they shouldn't be too confused by any sort of misdirection or option plays they're going to face. So I do think Notre Dame pulls away late, and I think it's a lower scoring game, so I'll take the under as well.
Army has already clinched a spot in the AAC championship game. They'll play Tulane, so fans of those schools are going to be rooting against Boise State. Boise plays on CBS Sports Network, 7 Eastern time. They are at the highest altitude for any FBS team at Wyoming.
Chip, is it going to be windy in Laramie? Is it going to?
It's going to be windy in Laramie.
Oh, and you know what that means. I mean, it won't affect Ashton Genty, I guess, unless he's running into the wind. But Boise State has kind of been, we use that term, playing with your food a lot when we talk about some of the top-tier teams in college football. Like, you come out, maybe it's a little bit sluggish. That's been Boise State the last couple weeks. Wyoming has not been as good as they've been in years past. But you start having that bullseye on your back. I think that's what happens to Boise State. You've been loading up. It gets a little bit more challenging to throw the football when it does get windy and colder. So I actually like Wyoming to cover this one, and I like the under as well.
Tell our friend Brandon Baylor to get his heavy coat that's got some wind resistance, because we got 22-mile-an-hour crosswinds going through War Memorial Stadium. And it's not just throwing the football. It's also your field goals, which might be a little bit wobbly. It might be that punt, which all of a sudden is a little bit off base, just a little. So I think that, yeah, we've got everything that we've seen from Boise, the defensive line getting better, teams loading the box. We've got everything we've seen from Wyoming this year, but more than anything, we've got a windy in Laramie wonder with those 22-mile-an-hour crosswinds. So happy we get it before the end of the season.
And at kickoff, it'll be mid-30s. It'll drop below freezing during the game. Producer Boney says chance of some snowflakes, potentially flurries. That would be something. Again,
great one to watch.
Brandon Baylor sideline, CBS Sports Network, 7 Eastern time. To the number 7 team in the country now, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Man, this was a juicy matchup going into the season, but Oklahoma, Danny, they're a double-digit dog at home for the first time since pre-Stoops, 1997.
Yeah, it hasn't been a great year for Brent Venables. Have to fire your offensive coordinator. You make multiple quarterback changes. Now you're back to square one. But the one thing that's remained constant is still seeing great effort from this defense. I think they'll do a pretty good job taking away Jalen Milroe's legs. And as good as he's been the last few weeks, I don't think the competition has exactly silenced any critics of him as a thrower. They blew out Missouri. They blow out LSU, again, a team that I think is a little bit overvalued as far as a big win, and they blow out Mercer. All games in which Jalen Milroe has looked incredible post-bye, especially since he's getting healthy. But I think this Oklahoma defense will be able to contain him inside the pocket. So I actually think Oklahoma can keep it inside this number and go under the total. Again, Bama, one of those teams, just needs to win. They're in real good position for the playoffs. Maybe get a little bit more conservative, play a little bit tighter. I'll take Oklahoma as the home dog and the under.
This is where our friend Bud Elliott would point to a game being efficiently lined. You know, you're looking at that 13.5. You're looking at 46.5. It's tough for me to find a lot of value, which is why I'm actually going to go to the derivative markets, and I'm going to go with the first half under 23.5, because what I see here is that Oklahoma playing on the road in Norman, Alabama playing on the road in Norman is probably going to come in with a game plan of trying to make sure that you just kind of lean on them with the run game. game. Oklahoma's defense should be fired up from the get-go. I see both of these teams playing a little bit of a stalemate early, but eventually Alabama can run away with it late. Now, do they win by 10 or 13 or 14 or 17? I don't want to sweat any of that. So best bet for me here in this one is a little bit of a low-scoring start. First half under 23.5.
OU has never lost 5 straight conference games. If they lose this one, it would be 5 straight for the first time ever. Let's go to a real interesting game down at Auburn. On the Plains, Auburn is only a 2.5-point underdog to Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M tied with Texas atop the SEC. Those are the only teams with one loss in conference play. They play next week. Chip, as you very well know, Mike Elko was asked about looking ahead, and he said, quote, "Our focus is single-handedly on Texas. I mean Auburn." What's that tell you?
It's Jordan hair, as we all know. It's Jordan hair. And when it's nighttime in Jordan hair, spooky things can happen. I think Texas A&M's on upset alert here. I've got Auburn. I don't know how. The football don't make sense. The numbers don't make sense. This number being so small doesn't make any sense. I can't imagine the way it's actually going to happen, given the fact that Auburn has been so short of anything that would remotely be considered expectations. The fact that Auburn might not even be a bowl team this year. And yet I know from lots of time of following college football, that stadium, that environment, crazy things can happen. So, yeah, it is not my most confident play of the week, but just for vibes alone, I'll take Auburn plus a 2.5.
I want to read Chip and Hassel. I want to read you guys a text that came from our friend Mackenzie Brooks here at the company. She does a great job with point spread. She said, "Am I on crack? Why is Texas A&M only a 2.5-point favorite against Auburn?" I'm just putting it out there. And I've replied back to her, I had the exact same thought when Texas A&M went to South Carolina. The spread was identical, and South Carolina wasn't very good. And guess what happened? A&M lost the game outright. I still think Texas A&M might be the best team in Texas. We heard one of the worst Freudian slips from Elko saying they were still focused on Texas. Much like Chip is talking about here, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is the SEC. It's been up and down. Texas A&M has been very volatile this season. If you get their best, I think they should win, but the odds makers, it stinks. I'm going to go ahead and trust them, and I'm going to say that Auburn gets the cover as well. Maybe it's a 1-point win. Maybe it's an outright upset, but I'll take Auburn here, and I will also tackle the under because I think both these defenses will show up.
Danny, you're making like multiple plays on each and every game.
I got to catch up.
Back to the top.
It worked last week.
We saved the best for last, Danny. Iowa State is at Utah as a 7.5-point favorite. The Cyclones are back in the mix, still in the running for the Big 12 championship.
Doesn't matter. I think Utah here gets the cover at home. Kyle Whittingham's squad. The one thing we know about them, they play with a lot of pride. They're going to play with a lot of fight. And Iowa State has really had a lot of wind sucked out of their sails the last few weeks. Once they suffered that early loss just a few weeks ago, the first loss, all of a sudden it's really been a different story for them. I think they still win the game. But Utah, the one thing you're guaranteed is a tough physical place to play at altitude. I think it'll be all Iowa State can handle. So I'll take Utah. And the other thing I know about these games, Iowa State's defense will play well, and I think Utah's will as well. So I think the under probably is my favorite play.
Yeah, Iowa State's defense is really good coming out of the locker room, making adjustments. You never know how they're going to try to, putt their way to successful offense if you're Utah. Give me Iowa State in the third quarter minus a 1.5. Like Danny said, I think Iowa State wins this game. I think Iowa State is able to wear down Utah over the course of the game. But at 7 and a hook, it's just a little bit too beefy for me to lay them all with the Cyclones. So let's stick to a spot where Iowa State has been excellent, and that has been coming right out of the locker room, outplaying the opponent in the third quarter.
Cyclones need some help to get to the Big 12 championship game. It starts with them winning out. They need Colorado to lose, and then weird stuff to happen with Arizona State and BYU. All right, guys, only one more regular season week to go after this, and it is rivalry week in college football. They're going to get you ready to go on Saturday morning for the huge slate of college football. It's Danny Kanell. It's the aforementioned Mackenzie Brooks. It's all of our very best, including Josh Pate, who's going to be in Big 12 country in Scottsdale, Tempe, Arizona. Arizona State is taking on BYU. Coverage beginning 9 a.m. on Saturday.